Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. You have tuned in to New Mexico Economic Development Department's webinar series, and today we are focusing on the New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund. And this webinar is being hosted by New Mexico Economic Development Department's Outdoor Recreation Division. And before we get started, I did want to let you know that this webinar and presentation is being recorded. We will post the live recording to New Mexico Economic Development Department's YouTube channel, and we will also send out the link to that to all registrants. Also, we will send out this presentation in a PDF form. So if you see any information that you want to have after it or access any of the links, that will be available. We did get your questions that you submitted prior to the presentation, so we will do our best to answer those and get you those answers. And then also at the end of the presentation, we will be taking live questions. So during the webinar, if you have any questions, any thoughts, please feel free to type those into the questions box and engage with us, and we will be answering those. So I would like to introduce the New Mexico Economic Development Department's Outdoor Recreation Division, that's a mouthful, Director, Axie Navas. Axie, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you so much, Joanna. Thanks for kicking us off. Yes, my name is Axie Navas. I'm the director of the Outdoor Recreation Division, which is housed within the state's Economic Development Department. The division celebrated its year birthday just last month, so it is a brand new division signed into law by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham in April 2019. And one of the really marquee projects that we're just so honored and excited to be working on and pushing forward is the Outdoor Equity Fund, which is what we're here to talk about today. And so with that, I want to introduce our two truly incredible panelists who together represent the driving force behind this pioneering grant program, the Outdoor Equity Fund. So first, we have State Representative Angelica Rubio, who represents District 35, Doña Ana County, calls Las Cruces home. She is a committed change agent. She was born and raised in New Mexico, earned an undergraduate degree in government from New Mexico State University. She's worked in Washington, D.C., both on and off the Hill, and has spent time in East Los Angeles as well to pursue her graduate degree, where she also became a leader in education, community organizing, and has established herself as a fierce advocate for consumer protection and fighting for equity across all fields. So thank you so much, Representative, for being here. We also have Las Cruces City Councilor Gabe Vasquez. He is an active community leader and conservationist. He is also a member of the Outdoor Recreation Division's board, and we are honored and lucky to have him. Hiker, a camper, a hunter, an angler, and the founder of the Nuestra Tierra Conservation Project. He spent the last decade of his career working on local, state, and federal public policy related to equity, conservation, and the environment. And he, as one of these architects of the Outdoor Equity Fund, truly understands the value of access, equity, and inclusion when it comes to outdoor recreation and education. So I just want to thank you both so much for being here today. And we'll start this presentation by hearing more from Gabe and Angelica about the vision and mission of the Outdoor Equity Fund. We'll get a bit more backstory on their connections to outdoor recreation and its transformative power, what it can do for New Mexican youth throughout the state. And of course, we'll also talk about the nuts and bolts of how to apply for this fund. And as Joanna said, we will save some time at the end to take some questions live and then also questions that audience members have sent in. So with that, Gabe, Angelica, I would like to pass it off to you. Again, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Axie. Thanks, everyone, and I'm sorry that I couldn't get on the webcam. I have no idea what's happening. I even wore makeup. So unfortunately, you won't be able to see me. So I'm really excited to be here and to be able to share this opportunity with both Axie and with Gabe to talk about the New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund. It was really the biggest highlight of my legislative career last year in the legislature, but more importantly, it was just a highlight to be able to talk about issues around equity that don't always get sort of the fair applause that I think it deserves at the legislature. And so I'm excited to share more about how we got here and where we're going.
Thank you, Angelica, or I should say Representative Rubio. It's great to be here with you, Axie. Under your leadership, I just love to see the growth of the Outdoor Recreation Division and prioritizing programs like the New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund as we build out an economic development strategy around outdoor recreation. I'm so proud to see New Mexico leading on this, and so proud to see the vision of legislators like Representative Rubio and so many others who supported this effort come to fruition with applications that are now out in communities across New Mexico. With that said, if you want to go on to the next slide, we can start the conversation. Great. Well, I think maybe we could start with talking about the idea behind the Outdoor Equity Fund. And it really starts with a fundamental understanding that both Representative Rubio and myself discussed over a series of months about access to the outdoors. There was a push in the state legislature a few years ago to create the New Mexico Division of Outdoor Recreation. And as Representative Rubio and I had discussions about who in New Mexico would benefit from such an effort, we wanted to make sure that nobody was left out in this conversation about investing in growing outdoor recreation opportunities. We knew that a lot of people were going to be attracted to New Mexico from out of state, folks with money, folks with resources, ability to go and visit amazing public lands and state parks that we have in New Mexico. And we wanted to make sure that our own population, in particular our youth and underserved communities, weren't missing out on the opportunities to visit places like the Valles Caldera, Carlsbad Caverns National Parks, White Sands, Organ Mountains Desert Peaks, all these amazing places that we want to market to folks to visit and provide economic stimulus to our state is a great effort, but we didn't want to leave our own population behind. And so we started having a conversation about how we build in equity into an Office of Outdoor Recreation. And for myself, I had been working with youth for the last 2 or 3 years as part of the Nuestra Tierra Conservation Project to connect them in a culturally conscious way to landscapes that we all were working so hard to protect. And we found that the difference that these experiences made in young people's lives was really meaningful and really tangible, right? Simply by being able to connect with the land around you, you develop an appreciation for your community. You start to develop an appreciation for conservation and the natural resources and taking care of those places. And so we wanted to make sure that the next generation of conservation stewards was going to come right here from in-state, from our communities, and not necessarily maybe graduates in environmental science from other states who would fall in love with our state. And so part of what we're trying to do with the New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund was to provide experiences to youth simply to be outside, to enjoy New Mexico's amazing landscapes, but then also to connect them to these potential career opportunities. The background that I'll give, as well as why I think New Mexico is such a great place to start with this pioneering program, is that, unfortunately, because we are one of the poorest states in the country, we have one of the worst outcomes for kids when it comes to academic achievement, child hunger, child poverty, and domestic issues in households. The outdoors, for so many of us, represent healing. And for these youth not to have that outlet in a place where we're so blessed with so much public land, to me, is an injustice. And so we wanted to fix that through this Outdoor Equity Fund. I think changing the understanding of environmental education was also a big piece of this for us. There's next gen science standards, there's core standards of how kids can learn outdoors, what they should be learning outdoors. And we really kind of wanted to dispel that and break down some barriers, because the fundamental problem in New Mexico is not next gen science standards or core, science learning standards. it's access, right? It's how do these kids get outdoors to enjoy these places? Who's taking them out there? Addressing all those barriers is what this Outdoor Equity Fund was really trying to tackle. With that, I will let Angelica continue a little bit more about the story of the origin here.
Yeah, thanks, Gabe. And I think one of the biggest pieces around this issue and how it all came to fruition within the legislature is the fact that it wasn't just environmentalists and conservationists who were behind this issue, but because of my relationship with immigrant rights communities and other community rights organizations across the state, and as well as the work that Gabe's been doing statewide, I think people understood the really the fundamental issue that it's not just about the outdoors, but it's really about young people having really the human right to be outside. And we see that even now with COVID-19 and how the outdoors has really brought such an opportunity for us to be able to really, I guess the best word to use is to cope with what's happening globally. We here in the state of New Mexico are super lucky to have so much access to public lands, and I can't believe that. I mean, it's crazy to think that a year ago this idea was so forward thinking. And looking back now, and I ride my bike every single night because it's part of my therapy. And to know that a year ago we were really creating a foundation for what many of us are experiencing even today. And so moving into the legislature and moving into the policy making process last year, I think part of the role that we had to play as community organizers and as people who care about equity meant also informing and educating a lot of our legislators around this idea of what equity meant for the outdoors, because we don't want New Mexico to just become a playground for people outside of New Mexico, and even those who have access to the outdoors, but more in terms of what Gabe describes as healing, really, but also thinking about how do we preserve and protect our lands for generations to come, and how do we create a new generation of stewards to be able to do that for us.
Thank you, Angelica. Absolutely. And as you know, the education piece was a little bit challenging right off the bat, because I think some folks wanted to clean. I think we heard that we want a clean bill on the Office of Outdoor Recreation, and to us that meant leaving people out, and we weren't okay with that. And Representative Rubio has built some really important coalitions and relationships in the legislature and amongst nonprofit organizations throughout the state that allowed us to get the support of more than 35 in-state partners and I think 15 or more national partners. And we sent a letter to the governor asking her not to support an Office of Outdoor Recreation that didn't have a New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund included in it. And so this wasn't an effort just on my part or Angelica's part, but really it was an effort, as she mentioned, on the part of civil rights organizations, immigrant rights organizations, LGBTQ organizations, certainly environmental and conservation organizations were behind us. But I think when we talk about intersectionality and genuine partnerships, this was a great example of folks getting behind an issue that maybe they hadn't worked on before, but realized how important it was for the development of New Mexico's youth, and about leveling the playing field when it comes to enjoying our state's natural resources. And so it all came together. We got some great support, and then we also, you know, the second part of this is also the investment piece, right? The economic justice piece of this. As out-of-state companies invest in New Mexico because of our growing outdoor recreation sector, we wanted to have a place for them to put their philanthropic dollars that would actually hit communities on the ground, impact youth directly. And so the Outdoor Equity Fund is a private-public program that allows companies like REI and other private entities like the Turner Foundation, both who have donated to the Outdoor Equity Fund, to put their dollars as they're profiting off of New Mexico towards a program that benefits New Mexicans directly. And so as we grow our outdoor recreation industry, industry partners, companies, and others will have an opportunity to give to this fund as, you know, as being good corporate partners to the state. If you want to go on to the next slide. So I'll talk just briefly about these photos, which were kind of some of the precursors to the Outdoor Equity Fund. This was an event that we put together with the New Mexico Wildlife Federation, in which youth from Jemez Pueblo got together with youth from Isleta del Sur Pueblo, which is actually in El Paso, technically a New Mexican Pueblo, but through colonization was actually disconnected and separated from most of the Pueblo communities in New Mexico. And we brought folks up to the Valles Caldera to reconnect, to learn about the land. In this picture, we're in an obsidian field, and youth from Jemez Pueblo that are part of the P3 Pathways program are speaking with youth from Isleta del Sur Pueblo about the importance of this particular landscape. These are the types of opportunities that the Outdoor Equity Fund will help pay for. If you want to go on to the next slide. This is a great event that we did with the Boys and Girls Club and a local fisherman named Chris Flores. If any of you on the call today are anglers or fishermen in New Mexico, you might know Chris Flores, who is a great mentor. He owns a company called Muddy River Catfishing, and he's one of these guys that just lives and dies by catfishing, which is not like the most, you know, it's not the fly fishing posters that you see, you know, plastered across maybe like corporate brands and that kind of thing, but something as simple and as genuine and as true as catfishing is really important to the way that we enjoy the outdoors in southern New Mexico. And so these types of opportunities, for example, the rods that all these kids used, the time for Chris Flores to actually be out there and mentor or guide these youth, even the van that these kids were transported in as part of the Boys and Girls Club, are what the Outdoor Equity Fund can pay for through the series of micro grants that are going to be offered. If you want to go on to the next slide. And then lastly, this is a photo from youth participants from the Juvenile Community Corrections Program, a partnership that we formed a couple of years ago as a way to provide youth who are in the juvenile criminal reform system opportunities to explore a different world outside of their environment, right, domestic and urban, and get outside to places where they might connect with themselves better, but also with their community and with the land, as a way to heal and as a way to turn the next page in their lives and perhaps make decisions that might have different outcomes. We did have some long-lasting relationships with some of the youth from this particular summer program because they were so interested in continuing to explore the outdoors. And this is actually a photo from a place called Valles Canyon in the Organ Mountain Desert Peaks National Monument, which is a special place. It's a cultural area where youth connected to the human history of this place and learned a little bit about who was here before we were. I think that's the last photo slide if we want to go on to the next one. Great. Angelica, do you want to start on this one or add anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Gabe, for sharing some of those pictures, because I think a lot of what we envision for the Outdoor Equity Fund, and you mentioned it earlier in the comments, is that a lot of times when we're talking about outdoors and giving kids access to the outdoors, I think people are really heavily set on this idea of like science and like learning the biology of the outdoors, which is awesome. But the purpose of the Outdoor Equity Fund wasn't necessarily to fundraise for specific curriculums or anything like that. Really, the curriculum is just getting outside, getting your hands dirty. And one of the things that I think is going to be really, really important for the success of this program is that there are so many non-traditional organizations and communities out there who are having these maybe really radical ideas of like how to bring young people outside and how to share a lot of what our outdoors gives to us. And I think that when we look at it from like a funder perspective, a lot of times it's around deliverables, it's around these really set principles on how folks are going to be spending the money. Really, the whole purpose of the Outdoor Equity Fund was to make it as creative for people as possible. And so we do have some requirements when it comes to the Equity Fund, particularly when it comes to underserved youth. There's been some back and forth on who gets to benefit from the Outdoor Equity Fund, and I think really this is the biggest priority. I think for us, and the vision behind the Equity Fund was that it's underserved youth, and underserved youth, it means folks who don't have a lot of money in a variety of different communities, whether it's in rural southeastern New Mexico or in a lot of our Native and Indigenous communities up in the Northwest, and even in like Mescalero, Apache, all of these different places around the state who have been traditionally left out of these conversations. Those are the communities in which we want to make sure that that a lot of this funding gets to be shared and distributed in these places. Part of the reason that this equity fund was so critical in gaining not only public and private investment was so that the outdoor recreation industry is also invested in this. This isn't just about how New Mexico is developing its own generation of stewards of the land, but it's also us trying to rewrite a narrative within the outdoor industry to say that you don't have to have expensive gear to go outside. You don't have to have expensive sort of what I like to call in the biking community, this elitist way of understanding of riding a bike. Like, you get on a bike and you ride it, and you can ride it with wearing your Vans like I do, and that's okay. And so this is really the mission of the Outdoor Equity Fund, is to give every kid an opportunity to really not necessarily just experience the outdoors, but to really to gain from it in a very healing and therapeutic way.
Absolutely, and I think the legislation that we wrote was broad enough to include, I'm sorry, if you want to just go back to the next slide real quick. It was broad enough to include a diverse variety of communities, but really the geographic equity piece that Representative Rubio spoke to is really important, right? That these applications, this funding could all be exhausted by Albuquerque, Las Cruces, Farmington, Santa Fe, because there's a population there that meets the requirements and meets the needs. But we wanted to make sure that it reached out, that the fund reaches out to rural communities, to tribal and sovereign nations, because it's really important that everybody in our state gets a piece of this pie. And so the requirement that was written into the legislation was that a program or a city government or an incorporated entity had to serve at least 40% low-income youth as part of the program that they ran. And so if you think about like a Boys and Girls Club, if you think about Luna County's after-school hiking program, if you think about, I don't know, the P3 Pathways program out of Santa Fe Indian School, if those programs can prove that they serve at least a 40% low-income youth population, then they're eligible to apply. I'm not going to lie, that's most of New Mexico, right? Because we are such a poor state. But communities, for example, like Los Alamos, right, or other communities that perhaps have the wealth in their communities and their families to be able to take youth on these experiences, don't qualify for this fund. And so that's where some of the equity kind of firewalls are built into this legislation. That also is true for the activities and applications. When it comes to taking kids outside, as Representative Rubio said, whether you're riding a bike, you're swimming in a local swimming hole, or even learning how to shoot pheasants, right, in a place like Hobbs, New Mexico, we want to make sure that all those outdoor recreation opportunities are valued and on the same level and same playing field. It could even be cultural learning, simply going outside and learning about a particular site in your community and why it's important qualifies for this particular grant opportunity. So those are some of the things that we built into the legislation and that Representative Rubio championed in the legislature, which took some education and that we hope really meets the audience, and that the dollars are distributed equitably in a diverse variety of ways, against paying for staff, paying for transportation, paying for gear, things that normal foundations and that normal funders don't pay for unless there's solid deliverables attached to it. With that, I will maybe turn it over to Axie, Representative Rubio, unless you have something to add on the actual application process.
No, I think this will be a good opportunity for Axie when you're ready. Thanks, Gabe.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you both so much. I feel like I learn so much when I hear both of you speak on this topic, of which you're obviously so passionate. And I get really fired up for the future of the Outdoor Recreation Division as a whole, but then also specifically of the Outdoor Equity Fund, which I do think is truly remarkable. And I'm proud to be able to be a small part of what continues to move it forward. And so with that, let's get into just the nuts and bolts of how to apply, and then we'll open it back up to questions for both Gabe and Representative Rubio and myself. So we're just going to forward to this next slide with some of the kind of basic resource information. And we will be sending and posting this presentation online so people can find both Gabe and Representative Rubio's contact info, as well as all the information that you see here. So I would like to point people first who have questions about actually applying to the Outdoor Equity Fund to our website. It is nmoutside.com. And from there, one can navigate to the resources page. And we have a program guide, 2 program guides, one in Spanish, one in English, that outline what are eligible expenses, what are ineligible expenses, the grant deadline. Grant deadline, as you can see here, for applications is August 1st. We'll be looking to award money by the end of that month, and then the grant cycle will be a full year. So you will have a full year to spend that investment on the programming that you are putting together, that you are advocating for. So that's the first step. And I'm always here and happy to answer questions and get into some of the nitty gritty. But that program guide is intended as an overview of who's eligible, and those other nuts and bolts questions of timing and expenses. So I'll point folks there. Then, of course, the application itself. These are the short links to it, again, in English and Spanish. Please feel free to take these URLs. You can also find them at that same website, nmoutside.com. We also have a full PDF of the website, of the application, so you can download it, prepare in advance, see the types of questions we're asking. Again, I'm always happy to answer those questions individually, but that's a good place to start so you can get a sense of what we're trying to prioritize and what types of projects and programs we're really looking to support. So those are the 2 main resources, and then the really important date of August 1st. And in the meantime, so throughout the summer, we're going to be doing a number of these webinars, digital town halls. Expect to see a schedule for some of those that are coming up, because our goal is really, as both Gabe and Representative Rubio have articulated so well, to make sure as many people know about this program as possible, especially in our rural and tribal areas. We want to reach out to the farthest corners of the state and make sure people who want to apply to this program, who qualify to the program, have the tools and information they need to do so. And then, of course, this is my contact info. Please reach out if you have questions about any of those resources on the past slide. Of course, about anything else the Outdoor Recreation Division is working on. But the Outdoor Equity Fund is really a priority right now, and we want to make sure that it's a long-term viable program that continues to get kids outside, to enable kids 18 and under to experience transformative outdoor recreation, and that continues to put New Mexico as a leader in this question of outdoor equity. So with that, I want to open it up to some questions. I have a list here that folks have sent in, so I'm going to run through those, and then feel free to add questions into the chat, and we'll try and also keep an eye on it live. But first, I want to start with kind of a big picture question, and Gabe and Representative Rubio, I might pass this back off to you, and you can talk about maybe the early stages, the creation of this fund, and what advice you might have for others. So the question is, what are the biggest lessons from starting up the Outdoor Equity Fund that other states should know?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and one that I think I ponder often, especially prior to COVID and when Gabe and I would get together, because there's a lot of best practices and learnings from it. So first and foremost, I think, and we mentioned it briefly, is your coalition work, really utilizing your network of people from all areas, because like Gabe mentioned earlier, this is an intersectional issue where when it comes to outdoor recreation and outdoor equity, it falls under issues around economic and social and racial justice. And so how are you inviting people from all those different realms, organizations from all those different realms, to be a part of this conversation? I think we did it really at a good time, because the governor it was a new governor who was just transitioning into the role right prior to the legislative session. And so we had a really great opportunity, and based on our own relationship with the team at the time, of the governor's team, I think having the backing of so many organizations involved was really, really, I think, pivotal in making sure that the Outdoor Equity Fund made it on to the legislation. Secondly, I would say that the issue around equity itself is an issue that it's not even a partisan issue where you might get some pushback. I mean, the pushback might even come from your own. And so part of the work that we had to do was prior to the legislative session, and then also during, to try to get some of our own like progressive champions to understand what equity meant to outdoor recreation, that we couldn't just push a division of outdoor recreation without addressing the issues of race here in the state, especially here in the state of New Mexico, where we're a multicultural, multi-generational state, where what I sometimes say is messy, right? Because we're dealing with so many historical and traumatic issues from our past, and then trying to address those through public policy makes it hard. And so it's integral to be talking about equity in so many of these different issues, and outdoor recreation was part of that. Finally, I would say that in terms of just process itself, and Axie and Gabe can speak to this as well, is that during the whole negotiating of the legislature, and me being a freshman legislator, sort of the nuts and bolts of the legislation itself, and where the Outdoor Equity Fund was going to live, that led to it was kind of problematic, because it ended up living outside of the Department of the Division of Outdoor Recreation. Outdoor Equity Fund was going to be living in a completely separate department, and it did so for an entire year. And fortunately, because of the leadership of Axie and her ability to understand the importance of putting the Outdoor Equity Fund in underneath the Division of Outdoor Recreation, we were able to do that this past legislative session. But had we known initially, we would have really fought to put that under the division in the first place. And so I think that's really the biggest piece, is making sure that the Outdoor Equity Fund isn't just something that we just kind of push into a department for the purpose of just putting it there, but that it has some real meaning behind it. And so if you're doing it in another part of the state, in another part of the country, making sure that the Outdoor Equity Fund it's living and breathing within the department that's going to really give it life.
I couldn't agree more, Representative. And I think To add to that, also working with folks who have experiences understanding the barriers to get underserved communities and particularly youth outdoors is really important. The folks who are already doing work in your state or in your community to get this population of youth out will be able to provide some of the best perspectives and best ideas of what the actual challenges are, because they will be different in every state. In New Mexico, I mean, shoot, I don't know if I can count the challenges on my hands and feet, because we have so many that unfortunately all stem from poverty. But in other states, those might be different. They might be more transportation focused. They might be, more focused on the lack of, I don't know, mentorship opportunities, or maybe gear libraries. It could look different in every state depending on what need you want to address. And I think talking with the folks on the ground who are doing that work with youth is really helpful. And then this effort was truly led by people of color and a coalition of people who have lived experiences that help them understand and help them push for this policy in a way that I don't think, high level, perhaps academic, environmental, or conservation folks who want to do good, right, would perhaps have had the same outcome or the same thought process. And so letting communities who are impacted or who would be impacted by this particular type of program be in the driver's seat making decisions is really important to the long-term success, I think, of a program like this, in addition to somebody like Axie being passionate about actually administering this program and it being administered correctly. And then lastly, I'll say, yeah, building those coalition partners, but also I think of a state like Colorado, where you guys are, blessed with an abundance of outdoor recreation businesses and tons more private resources, right, and partnerships. And so talking to your private partners on the ground, your manufacturers, your tour guides, your industry partners to support this fund, both from a policy standpoint, but just as importantly financially, is really important, right? If you can come with a bill to your state legislature with a commitment from the private industry to match those dollars, it looks a lot more attractive to legislators than maybe just saying we want public dollars, especially now as lots of states are facing budget shortfalls.
Great, thank you both. And yes, from the Outdoor Recreation Division chair that I'm really honored to sit in at the moment, I would echo what both of you have said, that I think a program like this absolutely has to be foundational to an outdoor recreation division. So that's how I see it. It is our, like I said, it is a cornerstone priority, and it is what we want to make turn into a long-term foundational part of the outdoor recreation world in New Mexico. I think it's truly crucial. So thank you. Another question, where is the RFP, and is there a required match? And if so, what are the parameters? Also, what are the project start and end dates? I'm happy to take this one. It's a little bit more logistical, although of course, Gabe, Representative Rubio, feel free to jump in. RFP, we're not going to a full RFP. We want to limit the hurdles to applying to this fund. So we want to make the application as easy as possible. There's still going to be hiccups, and I hope that I can help answer those questions for folks as they come up. I'm here for you 100%. We want to make sure that access to this fund is as easy as possible. So in that sense, there is no RFP. There is the online application, and both those links are in this presentation. They're also on our website. The required match, there's no required cash match. We're looking for people to let us know how much has already been invested in this program, if anything, and that includes both a cash investment, but also in-kind investment. Again, we really want to limit the barriers for who can apply, so we recognize that a match can often be really challenging to come up with. And again, some more details about what that in-kind match could look like are in the program guide. And then the project start and end dates, deadline is August 1st for applicants this year. Once the money is awarded, you'll have a full year cycle to put that money to work in the programming that you pitched. So happy to answer more of those questions, and then also point folks back to our website.
And actually, if I could also add to that real quickly, and to share that I think even just the question itself that's asked is exactly what we're trying to prevent in terms of the vision for the Outdoor Equity Fund, because both Gabe and I, who have been working in the nonprofit field for a very long time, have dealt with funders for a very long time. And we know that the requirements that funders have asked for, especially even state governmental and federal grants, can be so logistically, I mean, it could be a nightmare. That there's a lot of communities, particularly here in the state, who a lot of times just choose and prefer not to apply to them because it is so challenging. And so really, and so we lose out on some really great programs for being funded. And so part of the Outdoor Equity Fund and the reason that we made it as broad as possible is because we wanted to make sure that organizations who don't necessarily have the ability to really navigate a lot of these foundational, and sometimes, in my opinion, I think are very I don't know, there's words that I could use to describe some of these foundation type of questions and stuff. And so I think we wanted to lessen the amount of barriers possible, so that we can make it as diverse as possible for folks to be able to apply.
Thank you, Representative. I think that's really well said. We want to make sure the actual logistics of the application are not onerous. We want to make it as easy to apply as possible. So exactly right. That's not why we're not going to RFP. That's why we've made what I hope is a really streamlined application, and that's also why I want to be very open to feedback. We'll work with applicants to make this process better each year. And if you have suggestions on how to do that, please let me know. And if something's not working for you, please let me know, and we'll work with you so that you can apply for these funds. That is really, that's a key part of that, of the equity mission that is tied to this particular grant program. All right, and another question that touches on some topics that both of you have talked about already in this presentation, but I think it's worth repeating. Do sporting skills, teams, and events qualify as educational? You know, and I brought in that for both Gabe and Representative. How do you define education? How are you defining outdoor recreation? You both have made that distinction in this presentation, but I think it's worth driving home. And one thing I'll add in terms of actual eligible applicants, we really are looking to fund programs that take place in nature-based outdoor recreation environments. So, you know, be it hunting or fishing, skiing, hiking, general nature enjoyment, but the true nature-based nature of these programs is something that we're definitely emphasizing. But with that, I'd hand it over to our two panelists to broaden upon that at all, if you'd like.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that's one of the topics that we talked about early on in terms of the application of this fund, and what this fund is really designed to do and the hole that it's designed to plug. I'm not saying by any means that sports-based programs or applications are well funded, especially in the state, by any means, but I do know that there are programs, interscholastic leagues, athletic leagues, you know, lots of homegrown fundraising efforts, right, to get gear and equipment for things like football teams, soccer teams, uniforms. Local businesses I know often sponsor those kinds of things, and so there are some existing sources of funds and programs out there for that. Is it enough? Probably not. However, I think, as Axie said, thinking about that transformational experience that somebody has outdoors and the potential for them to learn from the natural world translates to you know, the activities that I think are more nature-based. However, I think ultimately, however the panel of judges or the panel of folks who will be looking at these applications looks at each individual application. And actually, you might be able to better speak on this in terms of the value of a particular program to what this fund represents into their own community will be the deciding factor. I mean, I can think of a program like, I don't know, like lacrosse or like soccer, right? These like culturally based sports in like Native communities or in Hispanic and Latino communities. Those are cultural activities in addition to also big sporting activities. So I'm not going to say that those wouldn't be allowed, but I think the intention is, as Axie mentioned, to be able to have youth have experiences in the natural world in settings that they might not otherwise have in an urban setting.
Thank you for that, Gabe. And I would second that. I think this is the inaugural year that we're open for applications, and our ultimate goal is to stay true to the mission of the Equity Fund, and that will be the goal of the panel that reviews the applications that come in. And we want to make sure that we're awarding money to the programs that are best upholding the ideals that created this fund in the first place. Here's a particularly pertinent question, and we got a couple versions of this. How have stipulations and guidelines shifted with the current virus crisis? Yes, obviously, this is a different reality than we were living in at the start of 2020. We have language in the application and our program guide that all programming has to adhere to current public health guidelines. We are putting that above everything else. We want to make sure these kids who are participating in these opportunities are safe. That said, I think the outdoors and recreation and education outdoors offers a huge opportunity for our youth moving forward. I think there have been studies that show that social distancing is even more effective outside, and I think that there are a number of procedures that these applicants can put in place to make sure kids are staying safe while also giving them the type of recreational experience that I think we've also seen, and to use Gabe's word from earlier, can be really healing, and we can find a lot of solace in these types of activities, and we can find a whole host of mental and physical benefits. And I think we're in this really difficult time, and many of us, I think, in New Mexico and as a country are grappling with a whole host of mental and physical difficulties right now. And so I think that this program is just more essential than ever for our kids. Will all the programming have to be done within public health guidelines? Yes, absolutely. But we're already hearing really great ideas of how nonprofits and tribal governments and other applicants are thinking about how to put those public health guidelines into practice in a way that protects their students. Gabe, Representative, do you have anything else you'd like to add along those lines?
I think you probably know more about the administration or the governor's directives in terms of the actual programmatic elements of being able to safely keep kids safe, keep families safe as they do engage in outdoor activities and how they use these funds. But I will just agree with everything you said about the outdoors being a place that our youth and our families, especially those disproportionately affected by this pandemic, should be able to access and is more important than ever.
Yeah, and this is Angelica. I would say the same. I mean, I think that as I mentioned earlier, I mean, even under this situation that we're in, the outdoors has brought a lot of mental health opportunities for many of us. And so knowing some of the groups around the state, particularly in different parts of the state, who have been impacted the most by COVID-19, not only have they been thinking already very creatively about bringing access to the outdoors for young people, that I'm feeling really confident that they'll be able to do the same under the current situation.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left, and so with that, I'd like to wrap it up and give you both the stage. If you have any other closing comments, anything that we haven't covered, again, I would emphasize that you can reach all of us. Our contact information is in this presentation. You can find me at the website, nmoutside.com. We're here to answer questions after this wraps up. But with our last few minutes, Gabe, representative, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Sure. I'll just, I'll just add that there are some amazing people working in the space of youth engagement in the outdoors and have been in New Mexico for many years. And I'm so thankful for them and the way that they engage with our communities. This is just a way to invest in so many of those programs and in so many of those people. But want to make sure I mention that there's just tons of amazing programs out there, amazing organizations that are working with youth that have been doing this for years. This is simply a way to build a little bit of investment into a systemic opportunity that will be there and replenished year after year, and that has a far reach across the state to really truly be equitable. And so just a nod to all those folks out there who are working with youth, who have been working with youth in these types of programs for many years, because they're really the foundation of and the conduits to make these programs happen and to make these activities happen and to ultimately make a difference in the lives of youth. And so thank you. And then lastly, Axie, thank you for your leadership. And without a representative like Representative Rubio to push this through, I'm not sure this would have ever happened, because there were some really intense negotiations in the legislature that we could spend a whole nother hour talking on. But so much of my gratitude goes out to Representative Rubio for all the work that she did to make this a reality. So thank you both.
Thanks, Gabe, and to you as well. Thank you, and Axie. I wanted to just say that for folks who are listening in, that you may feel compelled to apply for this program, and I encourage you all to do so. I also would encourage you all to think about maybe these creative ideas that somebody across the state that you heard about, that encourage them to also apply as well, because I think part of what we're trying to do here is to make sure that ideas that are not sort of already in the know are what we are really wanting to push and encourage people to think about. Because when Gabe and I first started talking about this issue, especially when it came to outdoor recreation, was that imagine if we were talking about equity in every sense of, like, every department in the state of New Mexico, right? That not only is equity an issue that we discuss and that is embedded in outdoor recreation, but that it's embedded in tax policy, that it's embedded in economic development. Like, this really is, I think, while it's inaugural and it's exciting that it's going to be, that it's starting here with the outdoor recreation department, that I would just love to be able to see this intersectional throughout the state and throughout so many of the departments that have a real direct impact on our communities across the state. And so I'm excited, and I encourage you all to really think about equity in a way that is, and access to the outdoors in a way that's going to be truly transformational. Because if anything COVID has done is it has unveiled a lot of inequities. And I think that while this issue has been incredibly tragic for folks all around the world, and especially here in the state of New Mexico, I also see this as an opportunity for us to rewrite a lot of those things and to essentially start over.
I think that's really well put, and the transformational element, I think, is essential. This has to become a bedrock, and where I see it as the funds administrator is the Outdoor Equity Fund is a bedrock of the Outdoor Recreation Division, and that's really just the start. So we're so excited to be able to have this opportunity to get these funds out to applicants throughout the state. And there's 2 points I want to home in on there. One that Gabe brought up, that this is really intended as a way to invest in programs that either already exist or new programs that folks want to want to get off the ground, and that this is a way to do so. It's in no way intended to duplicate existing youth outdoor programs. It's a way to bolster the ones that are out there, and the people on the front lines of this who are really doing this great work already. And then finally, yes, I want to make a call to everyone who's listening in. Please apply if this is a good fit for your organization and for the programming that you want to put together. And also, please share the word. As Representative said, we want to make sure that this opportunity gets out to everyone who is interested. And so we could really use everyone's help in doing that. Please share with your groups, with your social media followings, with your newsletter lists. And then, of course, if you have questions about how to do so, if you need resources to do so, please reach out to me. We're here to help. And with that, I think we will wrap up. Gabe, Representative Rubio, you are remarkable and so inspiring, and thank you both for making the time to participate in this call, and of course for being two of the visionaries behind this fund in the first place.
Thank you all.
Thank you all so much.